that letter is just so rich with wisdom and insight. What stood out for you, Brian, as you read it? What was the most had the most meaning for you tonight?
So I had a feeling you might ask that, and uh, there's two. I'll tell you the one with a bullet, but there's a second. So the first is if we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find out at the root of some unhealthy dependency and its consequent unhealthy demand. You know,
Yeah.
and the way to think about that is when I first got near this with you, I really didn't like that sentence because it sounded like a whole lot of work for everything, like examining every single thing that happened. And, you know,
Yep.
that's nice, but not for me. Um, but I'm very aware today that, especially if I pay attention to my body, I am really aware of like, uh-oh, something's not the way I want it. And I probably need to do something to accommodate rather than control.
Yeah. Right on, man. Right on.
Yeah, yeah. But the other thing that stood out to me, I'll be really quick. Um,
Take your time, man. We're not in a rush.
oh, great. Perhaps they will be the spearhead
Yeah.
for the next major development in AA. What I love about that is he's talking about uh, oldsters who are dry and brittle or relapsing, right? Really being the force with which a whole transformation can
Wow.
occur. And being personally on the other side of that, I just know that to be very true.
Wow. Well, I never looked at it from that perspective. That's a great way to say it, is that their suffering, if it gets to rises up to a certain critical mass, can
Yeah,
really generate a movement to start looking at what is going on. I'm sober, I've been practicing these steps, but something's missing. That's a great point, man. I never had looked at it that way before.
yeah. Just
Live
the
a guy
idea that, like,
my own
my
life.
disturbance, right?
My disturbance
Yeah.
is it makes total sense, man. He's really
Mm-hmm.
laying out that formula, isn't he?
Yeah.
Cool. You've been on this journey with me for a long time now, Brian.
Yeah. There's something I'm going to tell you in front of all these people that I was going to tell you on the phone. I said to somebody else, which is, I didn't have a really great father, which was difficult then, but um, I met you, and that really helped me be okay with that.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
cool. I'm glad to hear
yeah.
that.
Hmm.
No, I'm so glad to hear it. And I've watched you just, God, totally blossom into the
Yeah,
man you are and the therapist you are today.
yeah. I did not have a good father, but it's okay because I had Alan and have Alan.
Thanks, man. Woo! That touched me. I've got
Yeah.
tears. Thank you. Wow. Well, God, we're on step 12. You guys just witnessed a part of it, didn't you? That was incredible, Brian. Thank you for that gift. I'm quite moved. Quite moved. It means a lot to me. I think that one of the things that happens in this program, for me at least, is that you've heard me say, is that we're recovering our real self, our lost true self. And I know now more than I've ever known that there's a part of me that's always wanted to be of value. And I never embraced that because of some of my own low self-esteem and self-doubt and sense of unworthiness. But it means the world to me to be able to make a difference. And to hear that from you, Brian, touches me very deeply. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Well, let's dig into step 12. We're here. We're on our last step at this point in time, and we've been taking a journey through the 12 and 12 and looking at it from the perspective of what insights, because the 12 and 12 is when Bill really started to, I think, his ideas about emotional sobriety started to coalesce. So here we are at step 12, right? Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. We try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And I've highlighted that all our affairs because, I don't know how far I'm going to get in what I'm talking about tonight, but at some point when I come back in 2 weeks, because next week I won't be here, Herb is going to take the lead next week. But when I come back in 2 weeks, I want to talk about how important integration is in our life. And so that's just we'll be getting to that. But let's look at what some of Bill's initial comments were about this step. So he starts out his discussion of step 12 by saying the joy of living is the theme of AA's 12th step, and action is the key word. Well, let's take a minute and really contemplate what does it mean to have the joy of living? He didn't say joy is the theme of AA's 12th step. You see, that would have been a very different message, wouldn't it? But the joy of living. So, what does it mean to enjoy living? Well, I think it's very important that when we think about our recovery of our real self is alive. It's filled with curiosity. It's filled with passion. It has the potential to feel wonderful, ecstatic, to fall in love, but it also has the potential to be really able to feel pain at some very deep levels, sorrow, sadness, anxiety. You see, the joy of living means that we embrace all of life. That's the freedom that we're striving for, is to be okay wherever we are at this particular moment in our life. And when he says this is the theme of AA's 12th step, because that's the work we've been doing. By the time we get to step 12, we've laid a very different foundation for our life. I'm sure next week, Herb will be talking about our way of life, steps 10, 11, 12, right? That's our way of life. And Bill has given us a path to a way of life that creates emotional freedom, emotional autonomy. Now, he also says that this doesn't just happen. It happens by taking a certain action. He said action is the key word because we have to be very, very, it's like a lot of times if we go to a medical doctor, our participation in treatment, it's kind of passive, or we're given pills, we have to take pills or do this or do that. They're going to do something to heal us. Well, our healing in the 12 steps takes a lot of involvement from ourselves, takes a major commitment, at least as much of a commitment to this new way of life as we had before. Now, remember, we've been talking about going through the steps and doing a second pass. And the second pass we're doing now has to do with how our emotional dependence has created this unmanageability that we experience. Now, this is something that most people don't realize, that the next thing he says later on in this paragraph is this, that here we begin to practice all of the 12 steps in the program in our daily lives so that we and those about us can find emotional sobriety. Listen to this. He states very clearly the goal, the outcome of working the steps is the achievement of emotional sobriety. In August, I celebrated 54 years being clean and sober. And I'll tell you, I've been to a lot of meetings in 54 years. You know how many times I've heard that mentioned in a meeting? A few times, but that was usually when I brought it up. We seem to have ignored this, that the goal of working the steps is the achievement of emotional sobriety. All of the 12 steps, when we work them, especially from taking that second pass, the second first step being admitting our powerlessness over our dependency, And then working the rest of the steps around that dependency leads us to freedom. And that's what Bill is really talking about, is giving us an experience of emotional freedom. Here we experience the kind of giving that asks no rewards. Now, what does that mean in terms of emotional sobriety? Well, think about unhooking your expectations. We can do something to get something, right? It's a quid pro quo. I'll do this, but you better give me that in return. And Bill actually experienced this when he was first going out and helping other people that were suffering from this disease, and he would get upset that they wouldn't be able to get hold of it. And he'd get upset and pissed off, and at some time he was ready to give up. And then Lois kind of pointed out, and Dr. Silkworth pointed out, maybe your job is not to convince anybody, but to share your experience, strength, and hope. And maybe some people will get excited about that and start to follow your path. And that's what happened. We learn to cut the strings over our behavior, but you can only give something unconditionally if you realize at first how conditional what you've been doing is. See, there's always a paradox at work in recovery. We have to own what's true before we can set ourselves free of what we're doing. There's no bypass that works. If I try to jump over being honest with myself about how I'm really functioning, because I don't want to look bad, I want to look good, or my pride, my false pride doesn't want to look at that, or whatever it is, I'm going to stay sick. I'm going to stay stuck. Our 12th step also says that as a result of practicing all the steps, we have each found something called a spiritual awakening. And then he goes on to define that for us. He says, let us look at the commonalities of a spiritual awakening, meaning that a lot of people will come to it in a different way, but there are some commonalities, as William James talked about his variety of religious experiences. And this is what Bill says about it. When a man or a woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he has now become able to do, feel, and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resource alone. I like to read that to say that now we have now started to weaken the hold that our false self has had on us, and that we're able to now experience, right, the power of our real self, of our true self, which I believe is God-given. It's an amazing gift that we all have. And like you've heard Herb talk about a lot of times, we have free will. We can either choose to follow our real self, or we can go ahead and adopt a false self in our life. And as soon as we do, we cut ourselves off from real power, from a real source of strength. He said, he has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. So let's focus on that for a while. What is this new state of consciousness that you're experiencing at this point in your recovery if you've worked the steps and you've had a spiritual awakening? Well, the first thing that happens is that you realize that you have to transcend environmental support and learn how to support yourself. Instead of looking to our environment to make us okay, it becomes our job. In the meeting before this, Don was talking about radical responsibility for our lives. And that's what, founder of Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls, called it. He says, we start to grow up at the minute we take complete responsibility for the existence that we've created, complete responsibility for our symptoms, complete responsibility for how we function. The way our consciousness changes is it goes from a consciousness that is so riddled with contingency, meaning I'm okay if, to a consciousness of freedom that I can be okay even if. And now we realize that it's not what's happening to us that's going to determine our well-being or our happiness, but it's how we cope with the experience we're having. It's the relationship we have to our experience that is going to determine what it means to us. We talk about in emotional sobriety, we claim the experience we're having, we don't let it claim us. We claim the experience we're having, we don't let it claim us. Bill talks about this person with a spiritual awakening that he finds himself in possession of a degree of honesty, tolerance, unselfishness, peace of mind, and love, which he had, um, which he had through himself, or which he had thought himself, I'm sorry, that's a typo, which he had thought himself quite incapable. What he has received is a free gift, and yet usually, at least in some small part, he has made himself ready to receive it. You see, that's the important thing here, is that we do have to prepare ourselves to receive this gift of freedom, to receive this gift of emotional sobriety. And as Brian said, man, it takes work. It just doesn't happen to us. It takes being able to get in the trenches and starting to cry and grieve and scream and face this thing that I don't want to face and say that I don't want to look at this. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to face this a part of myself. And then we start to be able to face it. That's the preparation that he's talking about. We make ourselves ready to receive it. We do that by having humility. And that's what all the steps have done, right? Bill talks about that. Each step is digging that humility deeper and deeper into our soul. After we come to AA, if we go on growing up, I like to think of it as our attitudes and actions towards security, towards emotional security, financial security, commence to change. Before, our attitude was, I'm dependent on what you do to make me feel secure. I have to have this amount of money to feel okay. And what did I say before? Emotional sobriety is I can be okay even if things don't go my way. We realize is that I am going to determine whether I feel safe or not by how I react, how I deal with a situation, how I respond to the situation I'm in. If I don't step up for myself, then I'm going to be more dependent on you to take care of me and make me feel safe. But when I take responsibility for my safety, I say, ouch, don't stand on my foot. It hurts. Instead of waiting for you to realize you're standing on my foot. See, I take an active part in being able to establish and maintain my psychological boundaries. And in a way that I don't alienate you. That's the very important part as we learn how to take care of ourselves without alienating someone. You've heard me say it before. We act for ourselves without being selfish. As he continues to explore this issue, I love what he says. He goes, our demand for emotional security, for our own way, had constantly thrown us into unworkable relationships with other people. Though we were sometimes quite unconscious of this, the result had always been the same. So we fall out of one or two sides of the bed, of two sides of the bed. Either we tried to play God and dominate those about us, or we had insisted on being over dependent upon them. We either tried to control everything or we looked for them to take care of us. Both created some serious problems. So I'll read to you now a little bit from the 12 and 12 to just elaborate on that because I think he does such a great job in describing what happens when we do that. So this is on page 115, almost the middle of the first paragraph. He goes, where people temporarily let us run their lives as though they were still children, we had felt very happy and secure because they were doing everything we wanted them to do. But when they finally resisted or ran away from our control, we were bitterly hurt and disappointed. We blamed them, being quite unable to see that our unreasonable demands had been the cause. When we had taken the opposite tact and had insisted, like infants ourselves, that people protect and take care of us, or that the world owed us a living, then the result had been equally unfortunate. This often caused the people we had loved most to push us aside or perhaps desert us entirely. Our disillusionment had been hard to bear. We couldn't imagine people acting that way towards us. We had failed to see that though adult in years, we were still behaving childishly, trying to turn everybody, friends, wives, husbands, even the world itself, into protective parents. This happens a lot when we're traumatized, by the way, because then we're expecting the future to reverse our past, but it's not just then. We had refused to learn the very hard lesson that overdependence on people is unsuccessful because all people are fallible, and even the best of them will sometimes let us down, especially when our demands for attention become unreasonable. As we make spiritual progress, I like to think as we make progress in our emotional sobriety, we saw through false, these fallacies. It became clear that if we were ever to feel emotionally secure among grown-up people, we would have to put our lives on a give and take basis. We would have to develop the sense of being in partnership or brotherhood with all those around us. We saw that we would need to give constantly of ourselves without demands for repayment. When we persistently did this, we gradually found that people were attracted to us as never before. And even if they failed us, we could be understanding and not too seriously affected. Well, what a gift, right? You hear all of the emotional freedom that he's talking about, is that we really start to have a very different kind of a relationship with ourselves, with our relationship with other people, with life itself. So, with that being said, let me invite Herb and Tom in for a discussion and the other time. And Julia, if you're feeling good enough, you can join us too.
Hey,
Hey, Tom. Hey, Herb.
Hi, guys, gals, everybody.
There you go.
Julia has lost her voice.
Oh, okay. Well, Herb, you want to comment on a few of the things?
I
Because I
was
know.
just holding myself back like a
No,
racehorse
don't
at
don't
the
do that.
starting
Don't.
gate.
Yeah, no, listen. Hey, Tom needs a straight man. So listen, you're going to be it tonight.
Oh, I love it. That's great. Well, I'm not sure how straight I am, but be that as it may. Yeah, it's
You've become a lot straighter, Herb. That's
no, yeah, and we don't need to make it about me. But it's about emotional balance, and I reread step 12 in the 12 and 12, the longest chapter, but man, it is rich. It is so rich. And
so rich.
I read it again as if it was really new. It was really wonderful. And while you were talking, Alan, because he does use, and it became the theme for me this year of most of the work that I've done is the joy of living. Uh, um, as you were talking, I actually looked up Google the word joy, and I had done it before, but it got a whole a deeper sense, and it says a deep state, not
Mm,
outside, not dependent, not temporary, uh, not weak, but a
yeah.
deep state of well-being contentment, and I added satisfaction.
Wow.
A satisfaction with life, a satisfaction with ourself. A real sense, and thank you for introducing us some time ago to Nathaniel Brandon's work, because that really consolidated an awful lot of an understanding of human development or lack thereof in terms of self-esteem and a deep sense of worth and a sense of meaning and value, which I think is just so critical to become conscious of, and know that that's one of the promises of this process. And Bill's very quick to talk about carrying the message, and the groups are very easily to talk about it. But the one area, and that's been the gift of our all of our work on emotional sobriety, is about principles. There's very little commentary, very little conversation, very little subject matter in meetings about the practice of principles. And I mean, a lot of mouth and kind of a superficial conversation about it. But when you get down to it, it's the heart of the matter to connect to what we did in the third step, and that is to turn our will and our life over to the care of reality with a capital R. And there's a flow there. You talk about, and I love the phrase, I use it all the time, organismic life force, that acorn to oak tree metaphor that it's actually a deep, profound, mystical insight if we translate it into the totality of reality. And Bill comes from that experience. And I believe that was his experience that just permeated his consciousness right from the get-go, even perhaps without his actually being aware of it and or able to talk about it in any sophisticated language. But when you have the insight of that and then you read his work, it's clearly he comes from the experience that there is a flow to reality. And that's where this chapter talked about the key to partnership. The partnership in relationship to life, a partnership in relationship to ourself, a partnership in relationship to other people. And the word I use for that commitment, that decision to action in step 3, is alignment. Not in the big book, the word, but it just captures. I'm in alignment because I understand there are principles of reality as it evolves and manifests. And as long as I find those or attempt to find those and place myself or attempt to place myself in alignment with those principles, there's a flow. It's it's eerie. It's really eerie to experience the flow as I'm looking back over my shoulder or actually conscious of it on a daily basis. And there's the trust. And you ended your conversation with a comment about humility. The humility, and one of the Google comments was humility and awe and gratitude. And those are the kinds of things that just keep us right sized and in the flow and accepting the fact that we do make mistakes. That step 10 course correction kind of thing. I'm going to stop there, but a very profound chapter in this conversation. And so,
It's almost like all of his understanding of emotional sobriety bubbled up in this chapter, right? It
yeah, well,
really did, because it's the one he talks the most about emotional
yeah,
sobriety.
right. Well, and keep in mind, he wrote the 12 and 12 in 1953. So that was his evolution of his consciousness at that time, about 20 years sober.
Yep.
And that's where he then wrote that letter that,
Yep.
of course, the work that we do is based on.
Yeah, so much. Mr. Rutledge.
Yeah. the I appreciate what both of you guys have said, and it's like the and I love what and I can't even remember the exact context of what you were saying, Alan, but I wrote it down. And the first thing I wrote down was just about the joy of living, and it involves all experiencing all feelings, and I don't know how that fits actually necessarily with Herb's definition there, but it's like one of the word I use that word a lot, joy or enjoy, and because I use it in terms of the work that I do, that we do. It's like, and and you guys know that although everything is not happy in the work that we do, it's like, but I can honestly say I enjoy it. I have joy. I find joy in that. I think sometimes people are a little bit more comfortable with that term, finding joy in it, as opposed to enjoying, because well, let's face it, people often think I'm having a little bit too much fun anyway. But it's so, but I do. It's just like I just love this. I love that we witness. And it's not just therapists. We all do this in this program. I love that we get to witness each other's lives at such depth. And and I'll add just a couple of things, because, and this is just strictly because I've been working with it with clients all day, and that's perfectionism. And what I wrote here was the joy of living does not exist as long as perfectionism is taking up space in our minds and our souls. And I added to that, Herb, when you were talking about that, neither does the flow. It's like there is I one of the things that I frequently repeat with anybody about when we're talking about recovery is, don't think you can do this without recovering from perfectionism. You can't, because people, we have that secret little thing inside of it. So I'm gonna get all this stuff, but I'm gonna hold on to this. It's like it won't work. I've tried it. You guys have probably tried. We all have stories. Try. It's like, we may not even say it that way, but it's like, and when I say that, when it's the letting go, and then not there's, and joy is in the flow. I love that term, and that's all about humility. So that's what you said. Kind of wrapped it up, Alan. Amen. That's what I got.
Well, it's so funny you said this about because I remember having a discussion with Tom, my sponsor, right?
Hmm.
And he said to me, Alan, it's as though you think that the 12 steps are going to help you finally become perfect. You couldn't figure it out before, but now you have this magic elixir, right? You've got this formula, and you're using these things thinking you're going to be able to be perfect because I was going to work the steps perfectly. I was going to show everybody how you're supposed to work these steps, man. I was going to get it. I was going to nail it. And then, like in Est, what do they say? I got it, right? I
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
I got it. And he says, Alan, the only way that Tom could say it, and I knew at that moment that I was missing something, right? Like you said, man, I was totally focused on be now finally pulling off that perfectionism.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the one of the other big lies for me. If I could become perfect, I'd be okay.
And of course that's hilarious. It's
It is
like,
hilarious.
it's like
It's
it's just,
outrageous. It's outrageous. It's
it's-
such a denial of my humanity. You see, I
Mhm.
think when I look back, I was never okay being human. I
Mhm.
mean, I wanted to be something else.
Well, a little detail there you have a
A
problem with.
little
Yeah.
detail. It happened to be that I happened to be born a human being, but I sure didn't want to be part of it.
That's great.
Well, Tom, what have your reflections been on this?
I absolutely love this chapter. I've done and I do multiple 12 and 12 book studies, every year. It just seems to always come back, like someone wants to go through the 12 and 12, and as Herb pointed out, it is the longest chapter of the steps by a far, because I always look at like, okay, how much are we going to get through? What's the pacing and stuff? There's like 5 pages, 7 pages. The fourth step is 12 pages. The 12th step is 20 pages, and it's the coalescing of all of these concepts into one. And two things which popped up for me. One is it's in this chapter that at least three, four, five different places he captures the essence of emotional sobriety. He describes it in a way, and I'm not going to do it tonight, but maybe in one of the following weeks. There's two paragraphs towards the end of the chapter, which are these what I would have assumed to be grandiose perfectionist ideas of what it would be to be free, right? And he describes them as a result of working these 12 steps and what emotional freedom looks like. Um, and after doing this work in both 12 step stuff and emotional sobriety in general, being able to read that paragraph and knowing that my distorted drives have been restored, and think and the other phrases that he used, it's a beautiful vision for me and for everybody, and I
Yeah.
like to beat that drum because the joy of living and the joy of the freedom that results in it
Pretty
is
remarkable.
yeah, is remarkable. It's transformative. The one other piece that I'll mention is you brought up the idea of I forgot which part it was, but it's the uh, giving of ourselves or with asking no rewards, right? You had it in the slide, and my my birthday is coming up next month, which reminded me that last birthday I wrote a blog post, which I'll put in the chat. It was called "Scorekeeper No More," and it's like this idea of everything was transactional. Everything was, who's gonna remember my birthday? That was the whole premise of the article. It was like, who's gonna remember my birthday? Let me keep check. Like who called me? Who just texted me? Who's gonna call me in 2 days as a like that is an impossible way of living. Just sitting in this, gotcha, waiting for, people to line up to some idea that I have that they need to behave. And this ability of emotional sobriety to free me from that and be more present for just being in the relationships I am in the moment that arises. And when I do still set the trap, and I still fall into it, um, realizing it and getting it, having the opportunity to learn from it and not expecting perfection in terms of doing it right all the time. So there's just so much here, and I'm glad we're going to spend a couple weeks on this chapter.
Tom,
Well, Tom, let me just ask you this. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Herb.
oh, I was just going to say he used a very key word that I didn't actually use in any of my many words, and that was freedom.
Yeah.
Let's really keep in mind the bullseye of all of this, and that's ultimate freedom in the
Right.
truest of senses. I might touch on that next week a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to ask you how many last year, how many people called you on your birthday?
I don't know.
That's nice.
I didn't keep track. I will say, I don't know if he's here now. He's usually on the earlier group, but Howard did.
Yeah.
Now he's a good man.